Learning another language is a cognitively engaging and challenging task, but children learn languages remarkably easily and effortlessly. We have understood that process and methods of learning native languages are different from learning second languages. Though in both cases practice and social interaction are important. We learn languages by hearing, practice and saying, and we can learn new languages by conscious effort as opportunity to language development occur throughout life. In this part of lesson, we will study how different parts of brain help in language learning. You need to have some basic understanding of brain structure and functions to understand this lesson well. You may review lesson on brain and neurology loaded on this channel to know more about terminology which is being used in this lesson. So let us start with the part of this lesson, that is about plasticity of brain. We know that infants, they have very flexible brain. It is forming new synapses at a very fast rate. For example, within the age of 0 to 3 years, synapses increase from 2500 to 15,000 per neuron. Till the age of 7 to 8 or up till 10 years of age, children acquire any language by cracking the speech code through listening or by visual coding, and learn and speak a second language fluently and without any accent. The brain has remarkable ability to change itself biologically by making alteration in its cellular level and can cause even major changes by cortical remapping. Changes may be caused in physical structure or by rerouting sensory impulses. This ability of the brain to change is called as neuroplasticity. And how this happens? This happens by rewiring the neural connections which cause development in memory, learning, maturation and recovery from injuries, and also improve motor skills. Psychological experiences are also responsible for making these changes in our brain. We also know that due to lateralization of brain, some functions of brain have more tendency to be localized on one side of the brain. But it is seen that neurons help compensating small losses by forming new connections in the other hemisphere if one of the hemisphere is damaged. So that means that though some of the functions are having more tendency to be on one side of the brain, but if that side of the brain is damaged, then the other side of brain can compensate for the losses. So that is called as neuroplasticity. The brain activity associated with the given function can actually move to a different location as a consequence of experience or brain damage. With maturation of the brain, myelination of neuronal network happens. What is myelination? For that, I hope you remember that we discussed this figure, which is showing structure of a myelinated neuron. So there are two different types of neurons, that is myelinated and non-myelinated. And when we studied nerve impulse conduction, then we studied that nerve impulse travels at a faster rate in myelinated neuron as compared to non-myelinated. When the neurons mature, then they develop this myelin sheath over them. Because of that, the speed of data transfer increases, and because of this, speed of communication also increases because nerve impulses will be able to travel faster. And because of this, certain pathways are created through which the impulse can travel at a faster rate, and because of this, accent becomes more obvious. That means development of a particular way of speaking, that is accent, that is developed as per the maturation. As we mature, plasticity of brain decreases. So because of this, there are two things happening, that speed of data transfer is increasing, but it is also causing decrease in plasticity. But brain remains active and we can learn new languages throughout our life. And in this, the environment also plays a very important role. We can learn and memorize even when we are old. So that is why it is said that myelination, it limits cognitive function and decreases plasticity, and with age, adults find it difficult to learn new languages. So that means that in comparison to children, when we are learning new languages in maturity age or in the old age, then we face certain difficulty, but yet we can learn them by making a conscious effort. Language functions are centralized in left hemisphere in right-handed people and in right hemisphere in ambidextrous and lefties. Ambidextrous means those people who can use both their hands equally or efficiently. So in most of the cases, as most of us we are right-handed people, the language functions are centralized in left hemisphere. But if someone is ambidextrous or leftist, then language functions are on right hemisphere. So we all know that different two hemispheres, they may be having different functions localized on them. As this picture is showing us, that left side of the brain, it is having functions like analytical thought, detail oriented perception and verbal communication, whereas the right side of the brain is having intuitive thought and emotional thought and non-verbal communication. So because different functional specializations are present on two halves of the human brain, that means that both the halves of the human brain, they are not exactly same, and neural mechanism for some functions are localized primarily on one half of the brain, that is called as brain lateralization. Most people process language in their dominant hemisphere, which is usually the left hemisphere, which controls the right side of the body. When we studied about medulla oblongata in the previous lessons, then we studied that in that part of the brain there is crossing over of the nerve tract. So because of that, right side of the body is being controlled by the left side of the brain and left side of the body is being controlled by the right side of the brain. So as most of us we are right-handed people, that means left side of the brain is more dominant. But whatever it may be, left hemisphere is undoubtedly important in language learning, and this statement is based on noting that clinical research on individuals with speech disorders has indicated that left side of the brain is in many ways the hub of language processing. So that means that language processing, it takes place in the left hemisphere. Let us try to understand what is language processing. Language processing means how we use words to communicate ideas and feelings, and how such communications are processed and understood. On the left side of the brain, regions like frontal, temporal and parietal lobes, they formulate what we want to say, and motor cortex in the frontal lobe, it enables us to speak the words. So that means that these functions are more localized on left side of the hemisphere. Specifically, in two areas, that is Broca's area, which is associated with speech production and articulation, and Wernicke's area, which is associated with comprehension. Before any individual, let it be infant learning their native language or adult learning a second language, before any individual begin processing such aspects of the new language as vocabulary and grammar, they must first learn to identify the basic sounds or phonological elements. So that means that before any individual, let it be infant who is learning the native language or be an adult who is learning a second language, before anyone starts processing vocabulary and grammar, they must learn to identify the basic sounds. And these basic sounds are called as phonological elements. Let us try to understand what is phonology. Phonology is that sounds are very important in the language and there are rules for combining sounds, or how the sounds can be ordered or sequenced. For example, when we say word, then we first use the sound of which is produced by alphabet W, and then O, then R, and then D, and that is how we combine the sound to produce word. Ability to discriminate short and long vowel sounds. For example, when we speak evening and when we speak elephant, then we are using long sound of vowel E and short sound of vowel E while using these two words. Similarly, rhyming words like pun, bun and sun, and separating out individual sounds in a word, so we can discriminate trend from tend because the initial sound is different. And similarly, we can split the word into syllables. We can break a word into parts. For example, we can break a word, for example, knowledge. We say it like this, or we may break it into know, all, edge. We may break it like that. So that is how we split the syllables. But there are particular ways in any language how these words are splitted. These are called as the phonological elements. Phonology is study of sound pattern and it is not same as phonetics. Phonetics is about how to produce the sound or speak when speaker has no prior knowledge of the language which he is speaking at this particular time. It helps us to speak or pronounce words correctly. So it is more about pronouncing the word correctly. And phonetics is language independent. It is not dependent upon any particular language. Whereas phonology is how sounds are being used in that particular language. Phonology includes the significant sounds of the language and the rules for their combination. The words of a language are divisible into sound sequences, and part of language knowledge is an understanding of the particular sound used in a language and the rules for how they can be combined or ordered. So, phonological processing is very important and necessary for comprehension and production of speech and language. And it is also critically involved in processing written word, let it be reading or spelling. So, if the learner is not having proper phonological processing abilities or there is certain disability in phonological processing, then he will have poor spoken and poor written language skills. And where these phonological elements they are processed, that is on the right side of the brain. So that means that this is the importance of both the sides of the hemisphere. Left side of the hemisphere is controlling language processing, and right side of the hemisphere is processing phonological elements, which are very important for any speaker to master a language. The effectiveness of language processing is so great that human brain is able to accurately identify words and whole phrases from a noisy background, and this power of analysis brings to mind the great similarity between brain and powerful supercomputers. We can recognize the full phrase or full sentence even if it is being spoken in a very noisy environment, and that is the ability of our brain to process the language. Whereas acoustic details means that acoustic basically is a branch of physics which deals with the study of mechanical waves. So here it means the sounds which are produced by vibrations, or how what is the physical quality of the sound. So these all are processed in the right hand side. So this helps us to understand that how both sides of brain are important